I'm Sam and welcome to my Southern Rustic Kitchen. This week I'm whipping up some easy homemade bread recipes that you are going to want to try. So come join me in the kitchen and let's make some delicious meals. Alright, we are going to kick this week off with some pancakes. Now I'm going to show you how to make my basic vanilla pancake recipe, but we're going to turn that recipe into lemon blueberry pancakes. These are so good. I think these are one of my favorites. Now I will leave the link to this particular recipe for my vanilla pancakes in the description box below, so you can click on that and it'll take you right to the recipe. Or you can click on the link to my blog and then just type in pancakes in the search bar and it will pull up all of my pancake recipes. So what we're going to do first is go over the ingredients. For my dry ingredients, I've got regular all-purpose flour, some baking powder. I've got some wheat germ here. This is optional. You do not have to add this. I just added it for a little bit more fiber. I've got some baking soda, salt, cornstarch, and some sugar. For the rest of the ingredients for the vanilla pancakes, these are the wet ingredients. I've got some milk, buttermilk, vanilla, and an egg. Now, like I said, we're going to turn these into lemon blueberry pancakes. So I've got some lemon zest, lemon juice, and I've got some frozen thawed blueberries here. I just got them in this little bowl with some paper towel just to catch any excess water. And you're going to need some butter for frying. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we'll get this started. Okay, so we are going to start out by just mixing up all of our dry ingredients before you mix up your wet ingredients. If you start with your wet ingredients first and then move on to your dry ingredients, it's going to clump up all over your whisk, and you don't want that. So start out by mixing your dry ingredients and then you can move on to mixing your wet ingredients. So I'm going to grab a bowl and then we will combine all of our wet ingredients. Okay, so I've got my bowl and I'm going to add my egg first just in case any eggshell get in there. We can get it out easily. So I've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and add in my buttermilk, milk, and vanilla. Now I've got some melted butter here. You don't want it to be too hot because you don't want to scramble the egg. This is just melted and it's starting to harden back up, which is fine. It's going to melt into the ingredients, and this is just going to help keep everything nice and fluffy in the mixture. So just go ahead and mix that together and then mix this with your dry ingredients for the vanilla pancakes and you're good to go. But we're going to make these lemon blueberry pancakes. So I'm going to add in my lemon zest and my lemon juice for that nice fresh tart flavor. It really gives it a lot of flavor. So once you get all of that nice and combined and make sure that egg is nice and broken up and mixed into the liquid, we're going to add this to the dry mixture. And then just mix this until it's just combined. You don't want to over mix this because it'll create a really dense pancake batter and you don't want that. So just mix it until everything is nice and combined, and then we will move on over to the stove and get these started. Okay, so I've got everything set out here ready to go. I've got my pancake batter. I've got some butter for the centerpiece of my stove. You can use a non-stick skillet or a cast iron pan for these. Whatever you prefer or have on hand, use it. I've also got my blueberries and a spatula. I'm going to use a scoop just to keep them all about the same size, but you can use a 1/4 cup measure if you want to. So once this is nice and hot, I'm going to add a little bit of butter and get that all nice and melted down. Now you want to keep your pan on a pretty low heat because you don't want the outside to burn before the center has time to cook. And I've also got a plate over here just to put them on when they get done. Now when you take them off, you want to kind of lay them stacked up like this and not flat like this because the steam will make them gummy. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of these on. I'm just going to do probably about 1 scoop. And then we're just going to let these cook for about 3 to 4 minutes. Now you'll know when they're ready to flip when the bubbles start to come up and they stay open. If they pop and then they cave back in on themselves, let them cook a little bit longer. But if they pop and they stay open in the center, you're good to go to flip. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then I'll show you what they look like before we flip them. Okay, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but the bubbles in the center of the pancakes are staying open. Now once you get them like that, just go ahead and flip them over. You want to be kind of quick about it, so get your spatula under there and just kind of smash it under there really quick, and then flip them over. You want to flip them over away from you, so that way when you won't get splashed with any hot butter or oil. So this should only take just for a minute or two for them to cook on this side, and then we'll take them off and put them on the plate. Now if you want to make these bigger, you can do a 1/2 cup, you can do two scoops of batter, however you want to make them, that's fine. So I'm going to finish these up, and then I'll show you what they all look like when they're done. Alright, so I've got some more pancake batter on here, and for the lemon blueberry pancakes, if you have some fresh blueberries, you can use fresh blueberries. But once you get your pancakes onto your skillet or pan or the center of your oven, wherever you're cooking these, you can go ahead and add in your blueberries. Now I like to add these after I mix the batter because they usually sink to the bottom, and then you won't get an even distribution of those tasty blueberries. So same concept, let them cook until the bubbles pop and don't concave back on themselves, and then flip them over, let them cook for another 1 to 2 minutes, and then remove them to a plate. So I've showed you how to make both. I'm going to finish these up, these lemon blueberry pancakes, and then I will show you what they all look like when they're done. Here is my plate. I just have the lemon blueberries here. Now when you're cooking your pancakes, don't smush them down. You'll just make them really, really dense. So when you flip them over, just leave them alone and let them cook an extra 1 to 2 minutes, and they'll be nice and fluffy. So I've got my pancakes here. I just paired it with a side of bacon and some over easy eggs. And you can top this however you want. I just typically do maple syrup, but you can do whatever you want. So this is what we have for dinner tonight. Alright guys, for dinner tonight, I'm going to show you how to make biscuits. Now I'm going to make some sausage gravy to go along with it, but I'm just going to show you how to make my recipe for biscuits. These are very, very easy, and trust me, if I can make biscuits, you can make biscuits. So for starters, I've got my oven preheated to 425 degrees. So that's coming up to temp. I've got a sheet tray lined with parchment that I've just got lightly buttered with a little bit of melted butter. Now you can do this in a baking dish, a skillet that's oven safe, a cast iron pan, whatever you have on hand. Just make sure that you grease it really, really well with some butter. For ingredients, I've just got some all-purpose flour here. I've got some baking powder, baking soda, and a little bit of salt. I've got some powdered milk. Now, this is optional. You don't have to use powdered milk. I just like the flavor that it gives to the biscuits, and it helps keep them a little bit more fluffy. I've got some Crisco here. Now, I like to use Crisco, but you can do a mix of Crisco and butter if you want, or you can do just all butter. I've got some buttermilk, and I've got some melted butter. Now, the melted butter is just for brushing on the top of the biscuits before they go in the oven. I've also got some extra flour and some extra buttermilk, my biscuit cutter, and my pastry cutter here. So I'm going to get you guys set up. I'm going to grab my apron and we will get this started. Okay, so I've got my flour here. I've got my apron on because normally when I make biscuits I get flour everywhere. So I've got my flour. I'm going to go ahead and add in my baking powder, baking soda, and my salt, as well as my powdered milk. And I'm just going to kind of mix this together. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you can use a fork. It will work just fine. So just make sure that this is all nice and combined. There's no lumps in there. If you have a sifter, you can use a sifter. Alright, so now we're just going to add in our Crisco. Like I said, you can do half and half of butter. You can do all Crisco, all butter. It's just really up to you and what you like the flavor of the biscuit to be. I'm using just plain Crisco. And I'm just going to use my pastry cutter here. And I'm going to mix this in until it's all combined and it's kind of crumbly. If it doesn't all get combined in, that's fine. Just make sure the majority of it is nice and combined into the flour mixture. It shouldn't take too long. You can also do this with a fork. Like I said, when I make biscuits, I get flour everywhere. I remember when I was little and I tried to make biscuits with my grandmother and they turned out like Ellie Mae biscuits. I tried for years to make good biscuits, but they always turned out like Ellie Mae biscuits. So I just started to play around with the recipe one day, and this is the recipe that I come up with, and it has worked very, very well for me. And they turn out nice and fluffy and soft and just absolutely delicious. So I've got that all in there. Now I'm going to add in my buttermilk to my flour ingredients while I'm stirring with this little spatula here. And you're just wanting to mix this until it comes together to make a dough. If there's a little bit of flour that's left on the bottom, that's fine. It will get mixed up as we continue to mix it later. Now, if your dough gets a little dry, you can add a little bit more buttermilk. If it's too wet, you can add a little bit more flour. But I just like to add it in slowly so that way when I go to mix it, I don't have to add too much of one or the other ingredients. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix this up. Make sure it's all combined. You don't want to mix it too much. Because when you overmix the biscuit dough, they get really, really tough. So add more buttermilk or flour if you need it. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. Okay, so I've got this all mixed up and it's nice and combined. I didn't overmix it. And if you can see, I do have some flour that's kind of left at the bottom of the bowl. That is completely fine. It is going to get mixed up into that. And I'm going to take my little bit of extra flour here, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the counter. And then I'm just going to turn out my dough, my biscuit dough, onto the counter. Even that little bit of extra flour at the bottom, I'm just going to add it right onto the top. And now you're just going to flour your hands, and you're just going to kind of smush it together as best as you can. Now when you go to shape this, you want to kind of keep the counter with as much flour as you can. You don't want to over flour it. You don't want to add too much because you don't want a dense biscuit. And then you're just going to kind of pat it out, fold it over on itself, pat it again if you need a little bit more flour, add a little bit, rotate it, pat it out, and flip it over. You want to do this about 5 or 6 times. And then on the last round, you want to kind of press it out to about 1/2 inch thick so that we can cut the biscuits out. And what this is doing is it is creating layers in your biscuits. That way it will get nice and fluffy. Alright, so I'm going to kind of shape this a little bit. Add some of that flour right on top. And I'm going to press this out to about 1/2 inch thick. If you want taller biscuits, you can do it 3/4 inch. But 1/2 inch works pretty well. Okay, so I've got that. Get some of this dough off my hands. Now you're just going to take your cookie cutter. Now you can dip this in flour if you want to. To me it really doesn't make a difference. And you just want to push directly down onto your biscuit cutter. You don't want to twist it. You want to push it straight down and pull straight back up. So that way it doesn't seal the edges of the biscuits and you get that nice rise in the oven. Now, with the excess dough, all you're going to do is add a little bit more flour and you're going to shape this back into a ball, kind of like, and then you're just going to fold it on itself again, which is creating more layers. That should do. I don't want to overwork the dough. And then I'm just going to pat it back out to about 1/2 inch. Now you can do this until all of the dough is done. Now with the last bit of biscuit dough, I just kind of press it out, press it on itself, and then just kind of shape it into a biscuit, because this biscuit is what I call the cook's treat. It is the one that doesn't look as nice and pretty as the others. So I'm going to clean up a little bit and then we'll bring over the tray and we'll get these in the oven. Okay, so I've got my biscuits here on a tray. Now you can do this many different ways. You can line them up like I have here. I like to have the crispy outer edge on all of the biscuits, but if you want the biscuits to touch, that's fine. Just kind of arrange them closer together. They will rise up and touch as they cook. So I would leave about 1/4 inch in between each of the biscuits so that way they can rise up. So I've just got my butter here and I'm just going to brush the top of these biscuits with a little bit of butter. Now with these biscuits, this basic biscuit dough is what I call it. You can add whatever you want to these biscuits. I do the same recipe. I will make cheddar bay biscuits. I will make sour cream and chive biscuits. I will make sweet biscuits with it. So this dough recipe, biscuit dough recipe, is very, very versatile. Just keep in mind, don't overwork that biscuit dough because they will turn out like some Ellie Mae biscuits. So just make sure you get the top of these biscuits nice and coated. You want that really rich butter flavor on top. These are done. If you want to top these with anything, you can. You can add some salt and pepper to the top, whatever you want to do. I'm going to put these in the oven at 425 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. just until they are nice and golden brown on top. It really depends on the temperature of your oven. Some ovens cook at a different temperature than others, so I would just check them around the 15 to 20 minute mark, just to make sure they're not too brown. So I'm going to get these in the oven, and I'll show you what they look like when I get them out of the oven. Alright, these just come out of the oven, and this is what they look like. See, like I said, the last one is typically not the prettiest, but it still tastes absolutely delicious. So I'm going to add a little bit more melted butter on the top of these, and then I'm going to cook up some eggs, and then I'll show you the spread. Alright, here is my plate. I've got the biscuit here, and I just topped it with some sausage gravy, and then I've just got 2 sunny side up eggs on the side. So this is what we're having for dinner tonight, and these biscuits are absolutely delicious. I will leave the link to these in the description box below, as well as the sausage gravy. So yeah, that's what we're having for dinner tonight. Alright, today we're making some beans and cornbread. Now I've got my beans already on. I've got some black eyed peas here, and I've just seasoned them with a little bit of parsley and thyme, and I've got a couple of bay leaves in there and a ham hock. Filled it up with water, and I'm just letting these cook. Now when these get almost done, I will go ahead and add in the rest of my ingredients here. I'll show you what I got. I've got some total seasoning, some Lowry seasoning salt, some garlic powder and onion powder, and I've got a packet of this Goya seasoning. So I'm going to add all of that in there. You can add whatever kind of seasoning that you like, but when these get almost done, I'll finish these up. In the meantime, let's go ahead and make some cornbread. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make some cornbread. Now this cornbread recipe is up on my blog. I've got it right here. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. Let me kind of zoom you in a little bit. There we go. So I've got it right here, and this is the cheddar mozzarella jalapeno cornbread, just a basic recipe. Now the only difference is that I'm going to do is I'm going to omit the flax egg, and I'm going to add in 2 regular eggs. But if you keep scrolling down up underneath the picture here, you have what you can add in, and some things you can omit for the cheddar jalapeno cornbread that I'm making now. So that is where it is. I was just wanting to show you that. Alright, for the ingredients, I had to let my camera adjust the lighting. So for the ingredients, I've got some cornmeal here. I've just got regular yellow cornmeal. I've got some sugar, some flour, baking powder, baking soda, and a little bit of salt. I've got some neutral oil here. Now you can use whatever kind of neutral oil that you like or have on hand. I typically use either avocado, vegetable, or Crisco. Today I'm using avocado. I've got a couple of eggs, some buttermilk, milk, some cheese. Now I always have some kind of cheese on hand, so what I do is when I get the block of cheese, I'll just go ahead and shred it up, and then keep it in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, and it'll stay really nicely. But I recommend to grate it first. If you put the whole block in there, it'll just crumble up when you go to shred it. And I've got some jalapenos. These I also keep in the freezer. I just chop them up, seed them, and put them in a Ziploc bag and keep them in the freezer, so that way I have them on hand. So that is all of the ingredients. I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get this started. Alright, so before we begin, you want to get an oven safe skillet, or you can do a baking dish, whichever one you want to do, and you want to grease the bottom of the baking dish. If you're using a glass baking dish or anything like that, you don't have to preheat it if you don't want to. Since I'm using a cast iron skillet, I've got my oven preheated to 425 degrees. I added about 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil in the bottom of the pan, and I put that in the oven while it was preheating, so that way it gets nice and hot and you get that nice crispy crust on the bottom of the cornbread. So while that is heating up, we're just going to go ahead and mix up our dry ingredients. Now with cornbread, you don't have to mix everything into separate bowls. You can mix it in one bowl and it will work out just fine. Just make sure that there's no big clumps of baking powder, baking soda, or flour, or anything in there. And then you're just going to add the rest of your ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and add in my eggs, my oil, buttermilk, milk, and now we're just going to mix this up until it's nice and combined. Okay, so now this is nice and combined. It's a little bit watery right now, but we're going to let this sit for about 10 to 15 minutes just so that cornmeal can soak up some of that liquid, and it will help have a nicer crumb to the cornbread. So I'm going to set this aside for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will come back and add in the cheddar cheese and the jalapenos. Okay, so the beans are done. I just cut them off. About 3/4 of the way of them being done, I went in and added all of my seasoning and a little bit of black pepper. So I'm just going to let this hang out here for a few minutes. And in the meantime, we're going to finish up our cornbread. While the cornbread is in the oven, we will take out the bay leaves and shred up that ham hock, and everything will be good to go. So let's go ahead and finish this cornbread up, and dinner will be ready soon. Alright, so this has been sitting here for about 10 minutes, and it's thickened up very nicely. Now it's still quite liquidy, but that's fine. It will thicken up and cook very beautifully in the oven. So we're just going to go ahead and add in all of our cheese and our jalapenos. Now if you want this extra spicy, you can add in 2 jalapenos. I'm just going to keep it with 1. So I'm going to get this mixed in. Now my skillet is still in the oven, getting nice and hot. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. If you're preheating your skillet, be careful getting it out of the oven because it is hot and that oil is hot. So be very, very careful. I'm going to go ahead and get that out, pour this batter into the oven. We're going to put it back in the oven, and we're going to let this cook for about 25 to 35 minutes. Just until it is completely cooked through and the top is nice and golden brown. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Here is what the cornbread looks like right when it comes out of the oven. So I'm just going to let this sit here and cool down completely, and then I will turn it out of the pan, and then we'll cut it up into little serving sections. And this is what I had for dinner. I just paired this with beans and some onions on top, and it was absolutely delicious. Okay, so we are having a pot roast for dinner today. I've just got that going in my crock pot here. It's got a few more hours to cook. So in the meantime, I'm going to show you how I make my Dutch oven bread. It's very, very easy. I've got 2 different ways you can make this on the blog. So I will leave the link to this recipe in the description box below. But what you're going to need is, in my little stand mixer bowl here, I've got some flour. This is just regular all-purpose flour. I've got some salt, vinegar, some sugar, yeast, and I've got 2 cups of water. I've got a cup in here and a 1/2 cup in here. The 1/2 cup is going to be for my yeast to proof in, and then the extra water I will just add in after that, so that way I don't add too much water. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we'll get this started. Okay, so we are going to start out with the yeast mixture. I've got my 1 cup of water sitting back here out of the way. So to this 1/2 cup of water, you're going to add in your yeast and your sugar. And you're just going to mix this up just a little bit until it's nice and combined. And then you're going to set this to the side. And you're going to let it sit for about 5 minutes or so, just until it's nice and foamy and frothy. So that way it can rise. If it doesn't rise, your yeast is not good, so you'll probably have to redo it. But I'm going to set it here close to the crock pot, but not too close. I don't want it to get too hot. so that way it'll help it foam up just a tiny bit. To our flour mixture, I'm going to add in the salt, and I'm just going to give this a little mix just to combine everything. And my hands are clean, I just washed them. So I'm just going to let the yeast rise, and then we will move on to adding everything to the flour. Alright, so I've got my yeast here, and it's frothed up very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and add this into the flour and salt. Make sure you get all of that foam in there, because that is also going to help it rise. And your vinegar. And you're just going to start mixing this on low speed and drizzle in just enough water for the dough to come together. You may not need all of this, so just keep an eye on it. Just add in a little bit at a time until the dough comes together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like when the dough comes together. Alright, the dough has come together, and as you can tell, it is onto the little dough hook here. So I'm going to continue to knead this in the stand mixer for about 5 to 7 minutes, just until it's smooth and elastic. Alright, so I've gotten my dough here, and I just took it off of the stand mixer, and I'm just going to take it out of this bowl. Now it's quite sticky. It's not too sticky, but it's still got a little tack to it. So just go ahead and kind of shape it into a little ball, kind of tucking the ends under on the underside. And it's going to smooth out that top. Just kind of shape the bottom, pinch it together. And then you're just going to put it in an oiled bowl and make sure that there's enough oil in there to cover the bowl, probably about a tablespoon or so. And then put it down in there, top side down, move it around in that oil, flip it over, make sure it's all nice and coated. And then you're just going to cover this with a towel, and you're going to let it sit in a warm place for about an hour. In the meantime, while this is rising, I'm going to wait about 30 minutes, and then I'm going to preheat my oven to 450 degrees. I'm going to grab my small Dutch oven, put that in the oven while it's preheating, and put a sheet tray up underneath that on the bottom shelf of the oven, so that way it helps keep some of that heat and it won't burn the bottom of your bread. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will show you how to get this into the Dutch oven. Alright, so I've got my bread here, and it has doubled in size. I'm just going to take this out and just kind of shape it into a round shape, kind of tucking the center in on itself into the bottom. And I'm just going to place it in the center of this parchment paper. I'm going to give my hands a rinse and grab the Dutch oven out of the oven, and then we will add this to the Dutch oven. Okay, so I've got my pan out, and be very careful. This pan is very hot. All you're going to do is take your bread and set it down into your pan, attach the lid, and you're going to put this in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes with the lid on, and then you're going to take it out and you're going to cook it for another 15 to 20 minutes with the lid off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, so the bread is done. I just took it out of the Dutch oven, and I've got it sitting here on a wire rack. I'm going to let that cool. While the pot roast finishes up, it's almost done. And I've also got some potatoes coming up to boil on the stove. I'm going to make some mashed potatoes to go with this. Sometimes I will put the mashed potato or the potatoes in with the pot roast and just cook them that way. But today I just felt like making some mashed potatoes. So I'm going to cook this up, let the pot roast finish up, and then we will make our plates. Alright, here is my plate. I just added a little bit of the mashed potatoes onto the plate and then chopped it with the pot roast on the top and had the bread on the side, and I just dipped that bread into the sauce and it was absolutely delicious. So this is what we have for dinner tonight. Alright y'all, it is time to make some Nutella sweet rolls. Now I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the lighting. It is dark and rainy outside, so it's kind of dark in the house. I've got my lights set up so hopefully you can see pretty well. But this is what we've got going on. I'm just going to make my basic cinnamon roll dough. You can find the cinnamon roll recipe on my blog. The link to my blog is in the description box. But I will also have this recipe for the Nutella sweet rolls linked down below as well. So I've got some all-purpose flour, some butter that I've melted and cooled. I've got some salt, milk combined with water for 1 cup of milk water mixture. I've got some sugar, some vanilla. I've got a 1/4 cup of sugar here. I've got some yeast, 2 eggs, and a jar of Nutella. So I'm going to get you guys set up and we will get this started. Alright, so we are starting out with our yeast mixture. I just added my teaspoon of sugar and my yeast to my milk and water mixture here. And I've just got it stirred up. So we're just going to make sure it's all combined and off the spoon. We're going to set it to the side and let this kind of froth up for about 5 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to add the salt to our flour, and you're just going to mix this up really well. My hands are clean. And once you get that all nice and combined, all you're going to do is wait for the yeast mixture to proof, and then we will move on to getting these sweet rolls ready to go in the oven. Alright, so my yeast has proofed nicely, and all we're going to do now is add everything else into the bowl. I've got my sugar here. I'm going to add that in there. And then I'm going to turn this on low. I'm going to add in my vanilla, my melted and cooled butter, my eggs, and my yeast mixture into here with the flour, and I'm going to let it mix for about 5 minutes. If you need a little bit of extra flour, if it's too tacky, just add a tablespoon of flour at a time until it gets nice and smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because this little thing is loud. I'm going to go ahead and mix it up, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all nice and combined. Alright, so the dough is done and it's nice and smooth. I'm just going to kind of knead it on the counter for just about a minute or so, just to kind of shape it into a ball. And then I'm just going to take the ends and kind of tuck them under to make kind of like a ball shape. So I've got a bowl here, and it's got a little bit of neutral oil in there. I've just used avocado oil. So just take it in there, kind of swish it around a little bit, make sure the top is nice and covered with that oil. And then we're just going to cover this with either plastic wrap or a tea towel, just to make sure it's nice and airproof while it's rising. And then we're just going to put this in a, preferably a warm place to rise. You're going to let it rise for about an hour. Depending on how warm your area is in the house, it should take between 1 to 2 hours. So I'm going to cover this up with some plastic wrap. I'm going to put this in the oven. It's the warmest place in my house besides the laundry room. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will show you what to do when this is risen. Okay, so the dough has risen and I just turned it out onto a lightly floured surface. And then I just rolled it out to about 1/4 of an inch thick. Just make sure that you kind of flour it a little bit as you roll it out. You don't want too much flour. And then just roll it out to 1/4 of an inch thick. So I've got my Nutella here. Now if this is not pliable enough for you, you can scoop out some and put it in a bowl and put it in the microwave or heat it up on the stove for about 15 to 20 seconds in the microwave or about a minute or so on the stove, just until it's nice and pliable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread some of this Nutella all over the top of this dough, and I'm just going to roll it up like a cinnamon roll. Now I'm going to start with the edge that's closest to me, which is this edge here, and I'm going to roll it up into a cinnamon roll shape. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will get these in the pan. Alright, so I've got it rolled up in a log. I just rolled it up and pinched the seams together and then just flipped it on the upside where the seam is on the bottom. I've got my pan here and it's just lightly greased with a little bit of oil, and I've got a unflavored piece of floss here. And all you're going to do now is just pretty much just go in and use your floss here, kind of scoot it up underneath and cut it however thick you want it. So I'm going to cut these probably in about 2-inch slices. If you want them thicker than that, go right ahead and do that, or you can make them thinner. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up. I'm going to place these in my pan, and then we're going to cover these up and let them rise for another 30 minutes or so, covered in some plastic wrap or a tea towel. And while that is rising, I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 425 degrees. Let them rise for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to finish this up, and then I will show you what these look like right before they go into the oven. Okay, here is what the rolls look like right before they go in the oven. They're nice and doubled in size. So I'm just going to put these in the oven, cook them for about 20 to 25 minutes until they are golden brown. Here are the Nutella rolls right when they come out of the oven. I just let them cool for about 5 minutes while I made a coffee powdered sugar glaze to go on the top. Once I had that mixed up, I just poured that glaze right on the top of all of the Nutella rolls and just kind of let them sit for a few minutes just so the rolls can soak up some of that glaze. And you guys, these were absolutely delicious. I will leave the link to these in the description box below, as well as all of the other recipes. But you guys stay tuned for next week's meal plan. This week is going to be a fairly busy week for us, so we're going to be cooking up some busy weeknight meals. Monday, we're going to have a steak with chimichurri and some pasta. Tuesday, I'm going to make a super easy sausage and kraut with fried potatoes. Wednesday is ravioli lasagna with salad and fresh berries. Thursday, I'm going to make salmon patties, mac and cheese, and green beans. And these are some of my go-to quick and easy meals that I love to make during busy weeks because they are so easy to put together. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.